Well, Codie, this is going to be fun. I mean, a really solid, incredible woman on the other end of this phone. So thanks for joining me, girl. This is going to be cool.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I love it. I love it. So tell me this, right? What inspired you to pursue investing right outside of the traditional markets? I really just kind of want to start there.
Yeah. Well, I hate being poor. And so I think there was a certain point where I was like, this whole not having money thing is just not working for me. And I kind of came from a family that believed only in saving. You know, it was like save, 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 protect, protect, protect. And if you made a little money, that was great, but it was mostly just like, don't spend it and don't get it taken away from you. Typical maybe immigrant mentality.
Sure.
And so
throw it under the mattress kind of vibe.
100%. And like, did you check your, checking account? Did Chase charge you for your bank? And so I had like poor PTSD basically.
Right.
And at some point I was like, listen, I don't want to live my life this way. I think you've got to be able to earn more than you could potentially save. And so that's what got me into stock market investing at first. I was like, well, this I could kind of understand. People talk about this broadly. And then I think my entire career has been this progression of like, but how do people do it who have more money? And how do people do it who have more money? And so it was sort of looking at like, where's the best game being played? Like, where is the game where everybody who plays it has a higher likelihood of winning than anything else? And that's how I came to acquisitions, because I was like, oh, well, startups are terrible odds, 90% failure rate. What about acquisitions? Wait a second. An SBA loan failure rate is like at worst 25%, at best 5%. Those are pretty fucking good odds. I think I'd take that.
Yeah. So where did your views sort of evolve from relative to shaping your views on money and wealth as you extended? I mean, here you are talking about SBA loans and acquisitions coming from a home, it sounds like, where it was like throw it under the mattress and save as much as you possibly can. How did that shift happen? Because if I'm correct, I mean, you didn't go to Wharton or Stanford Business School, right? I mean, so good for
Arizona
you.
State, Harvard of the West, really.
Let's go. And so, how did you start learning, this from it was bootstrapped.
Yeah, I started as a journalist, so probably similar to you. Like, you pick up this skill stack of things from these totally disparate careers that turn out, by the grace of God, actually, to make a lot of sense in investing. And so journalism is really just asking questions, even inappropriate ones, all the time until you can simplify something that you didn't understand at all, right?
Totally.
And investing is really the same thing. So it's like, are you sure that that's how it's going to work? Wait, I don't understand this. What's happening here? You said that, but this looks like this. And so it's questions all the way down. And I realized that in investing pretty early on, because the people who act like they know everything in investing, they lose all their money real quick. And so I think one of my unfair advantages was that if you learn how to ask the right questions, it's better than having all the answers, because you're never going to have all the answers, but you could get all the answers if you ask the right questions. And so that was my idea and natural inclination. And I never really liked the word no. So I think any human who wants to succeed, if you can learn to have an allergy to the word no, you'll go pretty far. And I started doing that in finance pretty aggressively.
Yeah, I love how you say that analogy. I always say no is just feedback. Essentially, that's all it is. It's the getting you closer to a yes. So as you evolved, I mean, what now, right? You talk about money, you talk about wealth. What's your mission? For you personally, professionally, and sort of relative to legacy and all that?
Well, that's a beautiful question. Well, my first mission now, more than anything else, is really one thing, which is I believe that ownership equals freedom. So if you go and actually look at millionaires in the US, 60% of them own a business. They have ownership. So again, if we're playing the odds, we want to be somewhere where we have a higher likelihood to win. And it turns out if you have ownership, you're more likely to win. And so I don't know, I started looking around in 2020 and thinking that we were kind of losing it. We weren't asking questions of each other. It wasn't okay to question anything. And I think a lot of people got pushed around because they didn't have ownership. And so they didn't have a lot of financial freedom to sit back on. So I think if I have on my tombstone that I helped create, my goal is 100,000 small business owners, and I want to help 1 million people get financially free, like that's a material impact on a country in which only 6% of Americans own businesses. And so that's a mission, at least for now, that I feels like, wow, that feels feasible and really material. And the last thing there, I think, is that I think we've lost a little bit our belief in the dignity of work and labor, and that when you find things that you're actually skilled at, can make money at, and can be obsessed with, not that you're passionate about always, but you could be obsessed with it, it's really fun to work.
Yeah,
and
100%.
And I wish more people realized that. And I think if we got them back in line with having skin in the game in a way where they could actually have more upside if they execute on things well, I think more people would realize that it's actually pretty fun to labor. They've just been like slowly disconnected, from the real repercussions of any business, And so that's why we have bosses and employees hate each other, and they're like, one's arguing for the foosball table and one's firing everybody and doing massive layoffs the second the stock market pulls back. It's because like we're not very intertwined anymore, and you actually see that way less in small business.
And so you always reference a lot of data, which I love. What does the data show about employee engagement, retention, business success, if you will, when there is skin in the game?
Yeah, well, what's interesting is 85% of Americans don't like what they do, which is wild.
It's a staggering number. It breaks my heart.
Me too. And yet 60% of employees who work for small businesses report liking what they do. So do we actually just not like being a huge cog in a machine? I don't know. Could be. I think the other thing that's interesting is the data shows that if you spend $1 at your local small business, well, that local small business keeps around, and the numbers here are a little hard to massage, but let's call it 40 to 60 cents of that dollar stays in your local community. When you give it to Amazon, which, like, my hat off to Jeff Bezos, I really think he's an inspirational human. Your local community, if you spend on Amazon, keeps only 13 cents on $1. So we're sort of like centralizing all of our money and all our power with a few companies. And if we could do that more locally, the business doesn't have to be as profitable, actually, as Amazon does to have a big impact on its local community.
That's so interesting. I heard you actually talk about that. That's fascinating. What do you think are the most common misconceptions people have about money and wealth?
Yeah. Well, I think, I've thought a lot about, how people hate rich people these days a lot? They're like, hate that guy. He's too rich, at least on the internet. And I think the reason that is because we use a word called net worth, right? Which makes you feel like, hey, if my net worth is less than yours, I am less worthy than you are. And I don't think that is true at all. And so when somebody has more money than you, in our vernacular today, we're saying, I have more worth than you. And so when I talk about, hey, it's really easy to go make money, you could go do this too, I'm not empowering somebody. I'm putting a big fat mirror in front of them and saying your net worth is negative in your bank account right now. And they're looking back at me going, you don't know what my life is like. How dare you say that to me? And so I think our biggest misconception is that when people are here to help enable us and tell you you're more capable than you think you are with money, that's not saying that you're not good or worthy because you don't have it yet. And so I wish I learned that earlier. It's like, listen, I've never met a billionaire who didn't provide a ton of value to humanity. Do I like them all? No, but I've never met one that got there through luck. It just doesn't happen. Maybe you get luck if you inherit money or you marry an old dude and you're a young chick. Although I don't think that's very lucky.
Or a dude marries an old chick, by the way.
Yeah. I don't think we get that privilege as much. I'm open to it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, sure.
But I do think that that's why. And so it comes down to like our psychology of ourselves with money. And your worth has nothing to do with how much money you make. Yeah. It's simply you don't have a valuable enough skill stack yet. You probably have done what you wanted, not what was necessary. And you haven't learned the right game for you to play with money.
What do you say to people that, when you think about the cog in the wheel, right? The folks that are the 85%, And to your point, the 60% like what they do at the small business level. What do you say to the family with 2 kids and a couple minivans and a picket fence, and like they got like a little bit of a, they're sort of insulated, and they sort of look at each other and go, well, gosh, I don't love what I do. Or both of them or one of them, and we got to make a switch. But which I hear, I'm just going to grind it out because I hit retirement here. But they don't love what they do. And for me, candidly, Codie, what's interesting about what you're doing and your mission is, my dad didn't love his work toward the end. And I heard that a lot. And what became really important to me is to love my work. And I think it's possible, and it's incredibly important because we spend a lot of time doing it. So we should love it. I don't like emptying the dishwasher, and it takes 3 minutes, right? Yeah, 100%. So what do you sort of tell somebody about how to eject from that and or transfer in service of creating a little bit more joy in their life?
Yeah. Well, one, I think you can learn to love the game. So like if you love the game of business, you're more likely to be successful. I mean, now I could go run, in fact, I own a couple painting businesses. I own a couple window cleaning businesses. Do I particularly like window cleaning? No, I'm not very good at it. But I've learned to find the game of money and business fascinating. And so one, I would say to some people, like, do you not love the game? Because if you are a cog in a wheel and you're just going around and around and just getting worn down, but you have no idea that you're like racing to a final destination that's going to be incredible, and at the end of it you're going to get all polished up. I mean, I don't know how far we can take this analogy, but theoretically, if you knew where you were going and you knew it was really exciting and you knew why you were important and you knew you would be rewarded if you kept going as fast as humanly possible with as high level of execution as possible, could you like what you were doing? And I think a lot of people basically die in their careers for a couple different reasons. They feel like they're like office space, They feel like, where's the TPS report every day? And it's just this circular, this circular game of I'm doing a bunch of things that are useless that nobody cares about. And if that's the case, we usually blame it on the boss. But I would say for the employee first, take the blame on yourself. Be like, I wonder how much money I make this company. I wonder how much revenue and profit I make this company. I wonder how I compare to some of my peers. And you can start inside of a business and looking at it that way, figuring out who has the most valuable game inside the business, aka most valuable role. And then once you do that, you're going to start seeing the game of business everywhere. And for people even like my dad, I mean, he's probably worked in real estate for like 20 or 30 years. And at some point he was like, I really want to get out of real estate. And I'm like, the thing is, you've never actually invested in real estate while you've been in real estate for 20 or 30 years. Why? Yeah. And he's like, well, the risk, the concern. It's like, you were playing a game, real estate, but you never went to the next level of the league. You stayed. And so if you're in a job you don't like right now, one, how could you invest somehow in the industry that you already know that you have an unfair advantage in? Yeah. Would you like the job better if you were in charge? Could you just, instead of being an accountant,
those are great questions
go
to ask
buy
yourself.
an accounting firm, right?
Sure.
And also, if you are in a game that's a bad one that you hate overall, we have something called the perfect fit business. It's like 3 Venn diagrams. Or 3 circles together to form a Venn diagram. And in the middle, it's that like your obsession, it's your network. So it's hard to be what you can't see. So it's like, who else do I see that has a job that I like or that I could partner with? And then finally, it's your skills. And can you place those 3 things together to find something in the middle that can make you money, but you can also really like? And that's why I like buying businesses, because I think we were told, go follow your passion by a bunch of people who are already rich, because that doesn't make you rich.
Right. Totally. Well, and I think it's interesting because you talk a lot about buying boring businesses, and there's a lot of talk about that certainly today, right? And is there, and I know you sort of have a list of 130, I think it is, sort of ideas, if you will. Is there a sector that you like more than not, right? Like when we think about skate to where the puck is going, here we are, in Q4 of 2024, where's the puck going, Codie? And how do we step into quote unquote boring businesses, and what verticals do you like? What business spaces do you like?
Yeah. Well, where the puck is going for sure is that increasingly we are automating a lot of the things we do in life, right? So I probably don't love my prospects if I am a graphic designer in a world in which graphic design has become super AI automated. So if you're all concerned about AI taking over the things that you do, then I like to refer back to like, where can you only use hands, not head? And so in the book, I talk about this a little bit, but it will be a long time coming before AI takes over my plumbing companies or my roofing companies. And probably my accounting companies will get taken over first because it's very easy to processize out that type of software. So I think about that. The second thing I think about is, one of the best ways to make a lot of money is, what are the big guys doing at a really high level that they can't yet do at a smaller level? So for instance, the big private equity companies are buying up trade companies like HVAC, plumbing, anywhere that there's a government contract, and they're rolling them up into big companies. Well, what's the difference between you and them doing that? Really, not much.
Right.
The big private equity companies are starting to look at how can we apply brands to service companies. So like my painting and window cleaning companies. I mean, we own this one company, it's called Pinks, and this is a window cleaning company. And like the brilliant part about this company is the guys who run it are like, Molly, they're like cool. They're like,
Are they?
Like hipster.
Well, they're dudes with hats that Pinks. That's the name of their
they're
company,
like,
Pinks.
They've got uniforms that are like kind of throwback 50s gear. They have, little gold chains. They're good looking dudes. They have these little pink towels that they use. And they created this business model. It's a franchise where we have a bunch of different franchise owners. And they all kind of are these young people who are opting out from computers. They're like, we want to go do stuff with our hands. A lot of vets do it. And so they've created a brand around window cleaning. So when I tell you that around Austin, Texas, now we're in like 120 locations. Not all of them have launched, but like I probably get 3 or 4 texts a day. Like, how cool is this? I saw the Pinks guys and I, took a high five with them. When did you ever high five your handyman or your window? Right? And
Yeah,
I think
100%.
we'll do that.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I mean, and so when you acquire, tell me a little bit about your role in it. When you come into when you come in and acquire a business, obviously, it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of all of that. What's your process around that? I mean, if I was to tell you, hey, I've got X to go buy Y, can you get me inside of what your process is to do that?
Yeah. So there's 10 steps to buying a business that we teach. And basically the 10 steps go like this. First, you got to know about the opportunity. We call that the foundation. So this is realizing that there's a baby boomer generation that is retiring. They own 60% of all businesses in the US. There's something like 11 million small businesses that'll be up for sale inside of the next 5 years. If you count the numbers, there's trillions of dollars in assets that will transfer. So like, okay, that makes sense. There's a big supply demand, and that supply is messy. Like they don't know how to sell, they don't know how to value, they might just shut down their business instead. Then the second step is deal clarity, which is like, how do we find the right business for you? It's like Goldilocks. It's like too hot, too cold. No such thing as a good or bad business, just a good or bad business for you at good or bad price or terms. And then we go to the next step, which is origination. So how do you find a business? That's why we bought another company called BizScout. I try to practice what I preach.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
And
to
so
help scout and identify companies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the next one is selling you. So how do we get the seller to feel like, yeah, you should buy this? Yes, I trust you with my baby. Then we've got to go to due diligence, which is like, hey, is the seller lying to me? Is this going to work when I buy this thing? What am I actually buying? Next, we got financing. How do we get money for it? Then we got negotiation. How do we get them to terms that make sense for both of us? Then we've got structuring the deal. This part's really cool and applicable even if you never buy a business. It's all about like, how can I leverage all the different levers most people don't even know exist in order to make the right deal? And then we've got putting together your deal team, and then we've got closing. And so if you take those 10 steps and you're buying a business outright, like you want to own 100% of the business, I think it takes you about a year. Probably about the same amount of time. And they say the average home takes about 6 months to purchase.
Yeah.
So I think the average small business takes about a year.
Yeah.
And then
makes
if
sense.
you're buying a partial business, it could be much faster. So like,
Yeah.
I don't own all of Pink's. I own
Yeah.
part of it, which
Right.
means we could close that transaction in 90 days.
Right. Okay. And then you close it,
Yep.
but I mean, then what, right? As far as when we think about, I mean, that is no joke after you close it. I mean, I get the 1 through 10, and obviously there's a lot to unpack inside of that, but I'm thinking about when you're getting the report, what's your system to stay inside of the progress of the business, and how involved do you get, or what kind of systems do you have in place in your company, right, relative to staying on top of ensuring that your investment makes progress?
Yeah, one of my favorite lines that I put in the book too, but is about Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner, and he has this line that I love, which is, when you get a dog, you don't do the barking for it. And so the line with business ownership is really the same. So when you buy a business, you're not buying a job, you're buying a business that has managers in it, and hopefully an operating partner or even a CEO. And so your job is really to help the transaction get done and to help the CEO or the operator of the business continue to grow it, but it's not to do the barking for the dog. And so the way we run businesses is we make sure that the team is in place already, or we already have an operator in place. So when we take over the business, I don't have to go in and work. I would be in trouble if I had to go run a painting.
So that's a disqualifier for you right away if you're like, these guys can't operate this and grow it.
Yeah, unless I'm bringing in a guy. Like I have a guy, Paul, who kind of comes in if anything's going wrong in the businesses, and I'm like,
he's a turnaround
Paul.
guy for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
but say for a lot, like say you're brand new, you probably don't have a turnaround guy. You
Right.
don't have a CEO.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to work for you. You've been in a 9 to 5 forever. This seems so, ludicrous and too big for you. If that's the case, then you might buy a job instead. You might actually go in, and then we have what's called 9 steps to 9 figures and your first 90 days. And it's basically, how do you take over a business and have the CEO or the old owner of the business transition with you in the way that we used to do with businesses back in the day, which is apprenticeship. Why?
Sure.
Why did we change that? Because corporations started buying businesses as opposed to one generation handing it down to somebody else inside the business.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. What do you think some of the biggest mistakes people make are, Codie, when they step into acquiring a business?
Well, mistake number 1 is cash flow is king. If you don't have enough money to support a business, you will die. And so, they say that the number 1 reason startups fail, more than 70% of startups fail because of a lack of cash flow. And the second reason is product market fit, which basically means they couldn't iterate enough and they ran out of cash before they hit product market fit. And so you really want to make sure when you buy a business that you understand how much money it's going to take to continue to run it. And so we use a couple models in there, like one that's called a 13-week cash flow, to make sure that every single week I understand how much money I need in the business. But that's one, is people underestimate how much cash a business needs. Even if the business is making you money, it's not making you money every day. There's volatility like this.
Sure.
And so so people make that mistake, which is why we obsess on making sure you have enough liquidity. You raise a little extra money, or you structure the deal so that the seller pays you off over a longer term and you have lots of runway. That's one. I would say the second mistake most people make is they do it alone. And, like anything in life, if you have an accountability partner, you're like 2/3 more likely to do your goal, whether that's fitness or AA or whatever.
Right. Sure.
And so I really like people to do a deal partner. So bring somebody along with you who could be your wet blanket. Like, don't do that deal. That's really bad. Or who could help you during a time where you're struggling or you're playing too small. Say, no, you could do this.
And who is that person typically? Like when we think about that, I mean, like that, it feels like that could even be your spouse. I mean, it could be your COO of your existing business holding company, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that can play that role that can say, hold tight, girl, we're not doing this right now.
100%. I mean, here's what so we have a community where we teach people to buy businesses. And what I would say most frequently, I see a lot of spouses, which I think is incredible. You do have to make sure your spouse actually wants to do the deal, though. Because I think a lot of times they're like, how do, you probably get asked this question too. How do I get my wife interested in business? It's like, you don't like force somebody to have a different hobby. If she's not into it, like
she's not into
find
it.
a different partner, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But the second
Not
thing
partner, but different business partner.
Divorce her.
You don't want to do that? You're out of here.
Great. Codie Sanchez increases divorce rates. Awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say, it can be your spouse. I love when it's a business partner. We actually have a discount for anybody that comes into our group that is a business partner, because if you can have, like in entrepreneurs organization or in EOS, they talk about a visionary and an implementer.
Total.
So
I'm a big fan of that, Gino's work.
Yeah, me too.
Are you inside of that system? Have you used EOS?
I have used it before. I don't use it currently. Okay. I don't love the word visionary. It feels like, I guess if implementer was a cool word, but it feels uneven. So I think I like the idea of, like, you typically have somebody who's more sales focused and big idea focused. And you have somebody who actually gets the thing done and makes sure you don't blow up. And those two things are super powerful in business and making money. Do you use EOS?
No, but I mean, I'm familiar with it. I've read a couple of those books. I agree with you. I mean, I think you and I are sort of scrappy chicks, right? And so the vision thing feels like, wait a minute, but I want to roll up my sleeves too, right? I'm not going to just sit in a corner and think things up, right? Tell me, totally. How do you, I am a big fan, and I've had the opportunity to be around a lot of people that have made a lot of money, but they're miserable, and it breaks my heart. And I think what breaks my heart a lot is when I see people who chase a dollar, unintentionally become complacent in regards to the things in their lives that truly matter most. And then they find themselves with all kinds of stuff and money, but everybody's sort of hit eject because they're not around, they're not engaged, etc. What's your take on that, right? Because you're intense. You're no joke. You're running hard. You're a grinder. You're married to a Navy SEAL. Like, hello. Like, that felt like, when I heard that, by the way, I was like, that makes total sense. Like, because those guys are insane, you know? And so tell me, what's your balance with that, both for you personally, and how do you coach against that? Because I think that's a real tightrope. That's a really important thing to pay attention to inside of this.
Yeah. Well, I can only say what's worked for me here, because personalities are so different, but I think you want to bring people along with you. There's this monk of all things called Don DePonde, who I listen to.
I've spoken on stages with him. Yeah.
No way.
He's cool. You need to listen to my conversation with him. We had him on here. Yeah. Oh, Don DePonde.
Yeah. Okay. So, because he does this, have you seen him do the napkin?
No.
So basically he talks about this idea of, think about a napkin, like I was holding one in my hand, and there's 4 corners to the napkin in the middle. And in each of the 4 corners is like, your friends, your family, your coworkers, your husband, right? And in the middle is you. And as you become more successful, what happens to your family? Well, if you're picking it up from the middle, they feel like they're getting left behind, right? You're moving faster, you're moving higher. But if you can get them to see the future, what's happening as you raise? Well, everybody's raising, right? And so it's just having like a longer perspective. And so one of the things that we really teach in our community, and that my husband and I thankfully are very aligned with, is you have to sell people constantly on the vision of where you're going. And so if you're going to sacrifice weekends and nights and parties, it needs to be for a bigger purpose that other people are a part of. And if you're doing it egomaniacally so that it's just you and you're winning, then you're going to leave people behind. But what if you could take them with you? Like, my husband runs our fund family. He runs our holding company. My dad actually works for me in one of the businesses. My brother at one time worked for me. And listen, if you don't like a family member, don't employ them, please. But like, if you want people to come along, what a beautiful gift. Yeah. And I think that's another way the world got kind of weird. When did we start saying, oh, nepotism is bad? Don't hire your closest friends and family members. That's wrong. What? Who are you? It's my business. Yeah. And I'm going to hire the people who are the best at their jobs, but also people I love that I want to be successful with.
To bring with me.
Bring them along. Yeah. And
that's cool.
Especially at your events and stuff, as you're traveling and going on all the stages, I bring my husband. I bring my dog.
100%. Yes. Yes.
And I think that we miss that a little bit because our lives are, again, we're disjointed from like our bodies, our bank accounts, and definitely our businesses.
Yeah, no, I it's neat to hear you say that because my husband supports us too in many ways. And it is so fun. And I have family that I'm so close to, and to be able to do things with them. Obviously, I think you've got to have some tough conversations on the front end to create alignment and ensure there's connection in regards to what the expectations are, of course. But tell me this. I mean, you've negotiated a ton, right? As a sports agent, I negotiated literally for 20 years, like almost every day. Get me inside of a couple moments, stories, your top negotiation tips, some of the mistakes you've made. Yeah. I mean, to me, this is such an important tactic and tool that particularly, candidly, women, I think it is remarkably important for. I think it's certainly important for men as well. But I mean, the data around women not stepping in and asking for what they want is enormous. And it saddens me, right? So I want more women to do that. And men. I mean, we got to get what we're worth. But get me inside of a couple cool stories, moments,
well, I think
mistakes.
Men are just more used to rejection than we are. If we talk to each other as women the way men talk to each other, we would have breakdowns. If it's like, you're so fat, you look like, could you imagine? I'd have no girlfriends. If we got rejected by men as many times and as rudely in bars as we do to them sometimes, we would also not mind negotiating. Somebody tells you like, fuck off, no, don't buy me a drink. I mean, as a woman, I'd be like, what do you mean? This is so.
I don't think you would, Codie. I think you and I would post him up and say, go get it.
Yeah, probably not.
I mean, you might need new girlfriends, Codie, because I got some that are pretty tough. I hear you.
That is true. Now my girlfriends mostly just roast me, but definitely growing up.
Yeah, totally. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, it just wasn't that way. But I would say the more you get rejected, the better you get at handling rejection. And I think it's a beautiful practice to every single time, even when you feel like you shouldn't, to try to negotiate something because that's the only way you're going to get better. A couple of things that I like to use though when I'm feeling like a wuss in negotiating is I really like the shadow influence. That's why agents exist.
Sure.
Because if I'm a famous celebrity or if I'm an athlete, I don't want to look like a dick to Nike. I'm about to do this huge, exciting partnership. So what do? I go, yeah, Nike, we'll do all that stuff. Just talk to my agent about it. Just talk to them. And my shadow influence.
I was on the other end of the shadow, by the way, for a long time. So I feel you, girl.
Yeah,
but you're right. It works. It works.
It works. And it makes you kind of not like whoever the shadow is a little bit, but it doesn't really impact. You're like, oh, out of my hands, Codie. I can't do it. My agent. I don't know.
Don't you think people have figured that out, though?
No, I don't. I think with agents, yes. But if you think about it this way, how often do you get, if you're going to negotiate a small business deal, let's say, for instance,
no, totally.
I would love to sell this business to you, or I would love to buy this business from you at this price. Oof. I got to talk to my wife, though, because that... we're a team at everything that we do, and that feels like that actually might not work for us as a couple. I mean, this really works in negotiating salaries too.
Good cop,
and the
bad
internet
cop.
Hates it. Like I did a post on this saying, if you're negotiating a salary, use your husband, wife, girlfriend, whatever, and say, hey, I've committed in my relationship that I will take this job, but it really needs to be for $75,000. I mean, not if they're offering you 45, but if they're offering you 70 and you're trying to get it up. And the reason why is they can't negotiate that you're wrong. So if you use a market metric, if you say, well, hey, you could stack, right? So you can kind of stack against objections and say, hey, look, I looked it up, and the average marketer in Detroit makes $75,000 a year. And it's a little bit more than that. Actually, it's also that I told my significant other that I won't take a job that'll take us away from our new baby or whatever, unless it's for $75,000. And so you can use hard data, but also personal data, because you can't argue with personal data. And so a shadow is really hard to push against, right? Like you can't. But if I say, hey, the average marketing job only pays $75,000, you might say, well, according to that data, but in this instance, they can push. So you don't want them to be able to push. So that's one thing I like to do.
What are some other things that you think are great? I mean, which I think is, do you encourage, I mean, to me, the curiosity component here is powerful. What you talk about relative to curiosity, super powerful opportunity to pull back and look at the contribution that you're making or planning to make against the bottom line of the organization or the business.
Yeah. Well, I think
in service of justifying your number.
You're right. I think, I like one of my favorite terms I stole from a mentor is you can either have your price in my terms or my price in your terms, but you can't have both. And so I think often amateurs focus on price and pros focus on terms. And so, you know, if I'm going to sell a business and you want a $10 million price tag, I might let you lean into that. I might go, hey, okay, 10 million could work if everything is the way that you seem and we don't find anything else under the hood. But you do, of course, realize that, you know, if we're not going to make as much money as you said, if there's more risk that stands out here, if this isn't exactly what we think, that the business is probably worth less, right? Yes, you do? Okay. So you're kind of, you're delaying the no. You're saying, hey, I don't think you're unreasonable up front, but we got to dig under the hood. And then this is the chisel model, which is like you're slowly chiseling away at the price because you're like, oof, hey, that equipment over there, that thing's real old. That's probably like, we got to put another 100K into that. And then you're like, this one over there. And so you're chiseling at the price. Like one of my, I think, better deals was when we were trying to buy, back in the day, we had a cannabis private equity company, like growth equity. And we basically had this, it was like what are those things? Oh my God, this is so, pre-rolls. So they were joints, but like pre-rolled joints that we were selling. And in California, legally, or at least legally in California. And anyway, so we had this company and it was really expensive to roll those things. It's actually like a very manual process. And we had these little shakers and these little things, but we were like, God,
You're doing this.
Not me.
Okay,
it was like a $20
no, but you're like
million
describing it, like showing. Yeah, totally. Okay.
So no, I don't even use cannabis, but like they had these little manual things. It was a pretty big business, so you know a lot of people were doing it. And so we were spending like $1 million or $2 million a year on the labor of rolling these things.
Wow.
And at one point I'm like, God, that's crazy. There's got to be equipment that does that. And so what we did is we found a company that was struggling. They weren't making a ton of money, but they had 2 of these machines. And those machines, I can't remember the exact number, but I think they were like $750,000 a year. And we basically went to the company and we're like, listen, you're not making any money. This is a hard industry. You know, your profit per year is, I don't know, $300,000, $400,000. It's not much. I don't even think you could sell this business right now. Maybe you could for like $1 million, but I don't know who's going to buy it because you have this big tax burden. So I'm like kind of preceding them. And I'm like, why don't instead we do this? Why don't we roll your business into ours? We'll give you a cut of the upside of our business. You can continue to grow. You can say you got acquired because every entrepreneur loves to say like, I got acquired.
That's so true. That's so funny.
So I'm like, you had an acquisition, you know, you're a first time exit entrepreneur. You come into the business. We don't even actually need you to work after that. Just like take the equity and roll. And what I ended up buying the company for was like less than the cost of the 2 machines. So I think
outstanding.
So we paid a tiny amount because I aligned our values with them. And then I found a company that we basically did a glorified asset sale, but saved us a ton of money and equity. And we didn't have a lot of disposable cash at the time to just buy the machines outright.
I hope the machines still work too, girl.
Yeah, me too. I actually sold that company, so I don't know now.
Codie, tell me this. I mean, you have had tremendous success in the space that you're in. You have a book coming out December 3rd, Main Street Millionaire. You know, your content strategy has been instrumental in your growth. And for me, this is so interesting, right? And I think we live in this world where we all have our own networks, if you will, obviously.
Yep.
What is, what is it, and sort of how do you think about content creation, authenticity, your tribe, and what has been a remarkable amount of growth in service of what feels sort of like a little bit of a different discipline than M&A, the M&A space, right?
Yeah, no. I remember when I first started in content, I was at a private equity firm and I was a partner. And one of my other partners was like, "You're going to make TikToks?" He was like, "Don't you?" I mean, maybe it was Instagrams, but I still think TikToks in my head. He's like, "Really? You know, isn't that sort of retail, which is sort of, you know, investors' way of saying beneath you? It's not institutional. Institutional's fancy. Retail's like, yuck with the commoners." And I remember thinking, you know, wow. I was like, "You don't get it. we're kind of lucky in that we're on the edge of this generation that we see the power of the internet, but we're not too scared to put ourselves out there because we're not too ossified and maybe a little bit older. It's harder to change as you get older in order to take advantage of it. So I remember when he said that to me, that was when I knew I was gonna go do it. Because I was like, oh man, they don't even see the opportunity in front of them. They think that it's beneath them and I don't. So I think I'm gonna win. And then I treated it just like any other business. So, you know, when we create content now and when I create content now, I don't really think about authenticity because I just wouldn't do anything. Like, I don't have like a fake brand, you know, I'm not like,
right. That's an automatic. I mean, that's just an automatic, you're saying.
Yeah. I've never really heard when people, I guess I might be like a little Asperger's-y in it, but like, I'm not good enough to come up with a fake persona. It just like wouldn't work for me.
That's
so when
awesome.
people are like, be authentic, I'm like, bitch, this is what you're getting. Like good, bad, or otherwise. Like, I wish.
Yeah. I don't really know another way to roll.
No, you know, sometimes you see those people and you're like, God, they are so on brand. Everything they do, they're a brand. They, you know, they have outfits that they wear every time, and the outfits are the same. And I just don't have that. And so, I think authenticity is easy when you just go like, what do I find interesting, and I'm going to do that. And so that's what we do. But the flip side that I think is maybe useful for other people is I obsess on really three things. One is the stuff that I'm creating valuable enough that at any given time, if somebody saw like 3 or 5 pieces of my content and that was it, I wouldn't be embarrassed by that. I would actually be like, that's cool. Yeah, those last 3 or 5, like, that one wasn't great, but like those last 3 or 5, pretty good. If that's all Martha Stewart gets to see, and I think Martha's a G, like that'd be fine. And then the second thing that leads with that is like, even our notes are worth stealing. Like if you were to watch our team, I'm just obsessed with process. And so how often can we do a thing, learn from the thing, document what we did in order to replicate it again?
Yeah.
And then the third part about content is like, we're all going to die. How can you not take yourself that seriously? Like,
totally.
I think a little bit of nihilism really helps with content creation because it's like, who cares at the end of the day if people don't like your stuff? Who cares if they talk shit to you? You know, they didn't even know you before, so they couldn't like you then either. And so I try not to care too much, and that helps. Sometimes I fail at that, but I try.
When did that start with you? Right? Like when I think about the TikTok and you know, sort of when you sort of thought, you know what, that guy doesn't get it. I'm going to do this. When did that happen?
That was like late 2020, early 2021. Before then, I was a little bit of a wuss, actually. I mean, I was so much more of a wuss than you and most people who are like on the internet. I worked in a corporate job for like 12 years, you know, and I worked in big finance companies forever, and I made a lot of money, but I just didn't have enough. I was too scared. I thought I was going to fail. And I thought, what if I do fail? Like, then what happens? Then am I a failure? You know, I had a lot tied up in that. And then I really had to be pushed out. If I wasn't pushed out, I probably would have stayed safe. So now I think I'm a little pushier with people because I think
you know that you should have left sooner.
I should have left sooner. And I think more people are more capable than they think they are.
Yes.
And so if they don't love what they do, you should go try something else. And it doesn't even mean you have to own a business. Like everybody at my company, they learn from me how to do deals. So why do I have any employees? Why don't they all leave and go buy businesses? Because I give them potential for upside in my businesses, and I keep teaching them nonstop.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And so go find somewhere where you can work for somebody you can learn from. At least you could do something that you like, and you could figure out how to get upside.
I love it. I love it. So your new book, Main Street Millionaire, what's the big idea?
Yeah. Big idea is essentially this. If we don't take back ownership in our country, we're not going to have one anymore. We're going to be a nation of renters, and I don't just mean our houses. Increasingly, it's our jobs. Increasingly, it's our neighborhood coffee stores. We have the big few owning the many. And you know, in 2000, private equity owned 4% of American companies. Now they own 20% of American companies. You know, we have 3 companies that own 80% of the S&P 500. Then you could say that's like passive investing, except Bill McNabb publicly said we aren't passive investors. And that's Vanguard, one of the 3 big companies that I used to work for, by the way. And so I think I've never, like, just let it sit with you for a second. Like this idea of, hey, I'm going to own everything and you're going to just have a little tiny bit or basically nothing. Like, how does that sit with you? Not great, because no humans should own everything. We should have some more diversification. And so the idea is, if we don't make change, the big guys own it all. But there's a little sparkle of hope. And the sparkle of hope is that we have this massive generational wealth change with baby boomers. And most of those small businesses are too small for the big guys to pick up all at once. So what I think we should do is we should go buy them. And we should return back to this idea of owning a business for decades, like Warren Buffett talked about. Own a beautiful business, keep it until you die. And I think we can do that in our communities. It doesn't cost as much money as we think it does. It's not as complex as we think it is. It is not easy, but I think it's worth it. And so I'm screaming at people all over the internet because I think there's very few times where you get to make a lot of money drafting on something that's happening in the world and also helping somebody. Because a lot of times it's like, it's like Bitcoin. Somebody's got to sell you one back in the day, or like these coin speculations. There's a loser. But in buying and selling a business owners have 90% of their net worth tied up in their business. So if you don't help them take over the business, then they don't have money for retirement. So I really think it's a unique win-win that we are experiencing today.
Well, when you think about skating to where the puck is going. No, absolutely. That's awesome. And it's out on December 3rd, and people can find you. You're everywhere, right? I mean, you are. I mean, you're everywhere. And it's, and you're pouring information and content into people, which I think is fascinating at some level, because you've had a lot of success in business. You and I both know you don't make any money on a book.
No, you make no money on it. And
right.
Hard.
Totally. You think? Girl,
like,
I got 6 of them. Trust me.
Oh, yeah.
But tell me what's motivating you, right? Because you're sort of driven, clearly relative to creating wealth and money. And now you're spending a lot of time and energy doing things that really probably aren't giving you the same kind of return that maybe, buying in and then creating a little hockey stick growth and having an exit.
Yeah. Well, I think at a certain point, you kind of realize, like, not that I ever think there's enough money. I'd like more of it. I welcome more of it in my life. But at a certain point, like, money's not the main domineering force. And it's like, I looked into my future. And I think this is an interesting thing if you're in a job you don't like today, or even one you think you kind of like, is like, look in your future and look where you'll be 20 or 30 years in the future in that job. And like, are you happy? Do you like that? And I did that when I was in private equity and realized, no, I don't want to be like those guys. And instead, I would much rather help people get rich together than get rich quietly by myself. And so really with the book, I think the idea is, one, it's ego. I love the fact that I can actually help people with this, and I think it's helpful. And how like beautiful is that you could actually have something inside you that allows another human to change their life. I wouldn't change their life, but they would. Yeah. So I think it's a little bit of ego. And then it's also this realization that, like, man, back in the day when you and I were like first starting out in business, people they didn't write books like this about stuff. Nobody was giving you playbooks. And I think in this day and age, there's a lot of business cards as books. And so my goal was, man, I think books last a long time. I've made so much money by reading other people's, and I wish that I had this when I was younger.
Wow, that's super cool. I love it. All right, Codie, listen, I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire, and then we'll you can go identify the next one, man. Let's go next one, girl. So the best business advice you've ever received, and who was it from?
Oh man, I might have a little recency bias here. Well, actually, it was my dad. The best business advice I ever got from my dad was, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And this idea of you can't teach desire, and so if you have it, use it, because it's really rare.
Yeah. When you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, right? When you feel like, because you got a lot of demands on you, right? What do you do?
I do the thing I want to do the least. If you, it's that old Mark Twain quote. If you got to eat a frog, eat it first thing in the morning. If you got to eat two, eat the big one first.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I will most often do something I don't like to do first. And once I do that, somehow it just becomes easier, And if you flex that little muscle every single day of, hey, I did a thing I didn't want to do. I didn't die. Let's keep going. Because I find my willpower dies as the sun goes down.
How do you rejuvenate?
One, I mean, I'm a little bit of a loner, so happily with can it just be between you and I and all your listeners, which will be, I love a fantasy book. I'm like,
really?
That's
not what I thought was coming out of you, girl.
Werewolf book,
Oh,
100% by myself
Wow.
in an evening. That should be a business I own too, because they make so much money on fantasy books, but I don't want to ruin my passion. So
Right.
so I'd probably do something like that. And then I love a good, I'm a chick in some ways. Like I love a good bath, a little bit of Epsom salt and, and some music to
Helps you
chill to.
reset. Yeah, I love it. In the last year, is there a new habit or a purchase that you've made that's improved your life?
I just bought the 8 sleep mattress, which is kind of an expensive one, so I could give a cheaper one too. But I liked them so much, I reached out to them to partner with our business. Not that they're paying me for this ad, although I'm open to it.
Right.
But my husband and I, you play that thermostat game, I don't know if you do. I'm always hot, he's always cold, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
I sleep like a fucking baby with that thing. Wow. So that's probably my favorite.
That's cool.
And then I think the only other one would be, I have this, God, what does it look like? It's like a collapsible keyboard in a book. This is going to be a bad example. You could probably Google collapsible travel keyboard, and it has this thing that flips up your laptop, sets up a computer, and has a mouse, and it folds up just like a book, and you throw it in your briefcase. And so
Nice.
when I'm traveling, that's a game changer for me. And I love that thing.
100%. I love
And
it.
it's like $100, so that one's cheap.
There you go. A little cheaper than the mattress.
Yeah.
So the show's called Game Changers. So who or what is a game changer who has inspired you and why?
I always kind of liked Margaret Thatcher, Iron Lady. I loved that idea of, being tough and being okay with it and making decisions that other people don't like, but you knew were the right things to do or you thought were. I don't agree with everything, obviously, that any politician has ever done, but that idea of could you have an iron will, even and especially when it's not expedient for yourself, is something that I wish more of us had in the world. So I think I'd go with Margaret Thatcher.
I love it. Codie, great stuff. I mean, girl, I'm excited for your book to come out. I had a chance to get the pre-copy, checked it out. Really interesting stuff. And I think to your point, it's going to help a lot of people, and good for you.
Well, thank you.